This is Jennifer Gonzalez, welcoming you to episode 46 of the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through an exercise called the Gut Level Teacher Reflection. One of the most important things we can do to improve our practice as teachers is to reflect on our work. But we rarely set aside time to do that. In 2014, I created an exercise I called the Gut Level Teacher Reflection, and it's been downloaded by almost 2,000 people since then. I thought it would be helpful if I also created an audio version of the reflection so you can listen to the questions and think about them on the go. Before we get started, I want to take a quick minute to invite you to visit my website, Cult of Pedagogy, where I have built a big collection of resources to help teachers do their work better. I explore instructional resources and strategies, ed tech tools, books about teaching, classroom management techniques, and I also peek into real schools to look at the innovative things teachers are doing in their classrooms. I also have these posts I call rants and pep talks, which are basically essays I've written about the things we don't always talk about in education, but we should. One of these is called Letter to an Overachiever, and it's actually a letter I wrote to myself during a week when I got completely overwhelmed by all the stuff I had to do, and I had to have a talk with my perfectionism. I thought it would be good to share with teachers since so many of you have probably experienced that same pressure. Anyway, if you've never really been to the site, take a little time and visit cultofpedagogy.com. As one of my readers once said, it's not just a website, it's an experience. Also, one more thing. This will be my last podcast for a little while. I'm taking a break for the summer, so my production schedule is going to slow way down. The next episode will be out on July 3rd. That's just sort of like a summer bonus episode. And then there will be another break until late July. So if you're listening to these episodes in real time, just know that I'll be back. I'm just taking a little time off. Okay, I'm going to start by reading the introduction to the reflection, and then we will get started on the exercise itself. Okay, this is the Gut Level Teacher Reflection. 5 questions that pinpoint your real needs. Sometimes I will be going about my normal day and I'll notice a negative haze has descended on me. Some vague feeling of apprehension, guilt, or maybe self-pity, but I won't have a clue where it came from. If I ignore this feeling, it just gets worse. But if I stop and try to trace it back to where it came from, I can usually pinpoint something. An off-the-cuff comment that sparked jealousy, a news preview that spun me into a worry spiral, the facial expression of an acquaintance that planted a seed of insecurity. Once I nail down the source of a bad feeling, I can think it through and make a plan to deal with it. This practice can be applied to our teaching as well. The end of a school year is a natural time to reflect, and while it's easy to find good questions for reviewing accomplishments and setbacks, I believe that to learn as much as possible from a reflection on your teaching, you have to let your gut talk too. So this exercise consists of 5 questions that can help you listen to your body's emotional responses and uncover problem areas in your teaching. You can use it when the year is over, before the start of a new semester, or really any time it feels like things aren't going well, but you just can't figure out why. What we're going to do is look at 5 different areas of your teaching life, and in each one of these areas, you're going to identify 2 to 3 things that need improvement. And then once we've looked at all 5 areas, we're going to create an action plan for how you can actually make those improvements in those areas for the upcoming school year, or even for the year that you're currently in. Before we start, just know that there is a downloadable worksheet of these questions, and it actually has like spaces for you to write down your responses and a place to actually create an action plan. So I'm going to walk you through the questions one at a time. Question number 1. Look around your classroom, or if you're not in it, picture it in your mind. What parts of the room make you feel tense, anxious, or exhausted? What parts make you feel calm, happy, or proud? So if you're not in your room right now, just picture it and really move around the room slowly, or you can even imagine yourself walking through the room and walking to each corner of the room. And just sort of pay attention to how you feel in each section. Sometimes the reasons for these feelings will be clear. So for example, maybe your back table is always cluttered, or the traffic patterns in one part of the room were just awful, or there's a particular shelf that contains materials that never got used for an activity that never ended up happening. And so just notice what you're feeling in different parts of the room. And then in other cases, there may be parts of the room that make you feel a certain way, and they may have deeper reasons. Maybe there's a poster that gives you a bad feeling. Maybe you were hanging that poster right before you gave your class the worst yelling you ever unleashed. Or maybe two kids got in a fight right by the pencil sharpener. Maybe the classroom phone reminds you of a terrible call you received. It may not be apparent right away why you feel negative about certain parts of the room. So write them down, think about them, and if you can't figure out why you have a bad feeling about a certain part of the room right now, just take note of it and think about it for a while, because it's likely that the reason will surface after a while. Once you have considered all parts of your room, pick 2 to 3 hot spots that need the most attention. These areas should be your priorities for change. What we're doing with each of these questions is we're going to think through these areas of your teaching, these physical areas and non-physical areas, and then we're going to have an action plan at the end. So pick 2 or 3 parts of the room that either need adjusting or that call up real negative feelings for you, and so those need to be addressed in some way. Okay, so that question number 1 has to do with the classroom. Now, for number 2, I want you to open up your plan book or your spreadsheet or wherever it is that you keep lesson plans from the year. And ideally, what we would have is sort of a year's worth of plans. If you're partway through the year, then just sort of go back to the beginning of the school year and just start browsing, paying attention to how you're feeling as your eyes meet certain events. What days and weeks give you a lift when you see them, a feeling of pride or satisfaction? And which ones make you feel disappointed, irritated, or embarrassed? You may not know exactly what made certain lessons great and others not so great, but your gut reaction will tell you that there's something to investigate if you're feeling a negative feeling. Maybe if it's a positive feeling, you see something and you realize, oh, that's a lesson I took a big risk. I took a risk, in my teaching, and it really paid off. There were great learning gains. Or maybe you tried something new and it completely flopped. Or maybe when you're looking through your lessons, you're seeing a lot of the same thing over and over and over again. And maybe that's bringing up a feeling of just sort of flatness or depression, of just like, wow, there's not a lot of variety here. Or maybe there were times when your plans fell apart because you said yes to something when you should have said no. Maybe you went along with someone else's idea and it didn't turn out well. Or maybe there was a time when you just bit off way more than you could chew and it all kind of fell apart. See if you can find common themes or patterns. What changes do you need to make so that you feel less stressed about your workload and more satisfied about how you design your students' learning experiences? And then pick 2 or 3 sort of priorities or 2 or 3 areas that are a concern for you that you'd like to work on. So maybe for you it's planning less, or maybe you're finding that you just need a little bit more variety, or maybe what you're seeing is a lot of things that you started and then you had to really rush to finish them and you didn't finish them in a satisfying way. So every person is going to have a different kind of pattern that they need to address. And if you're looking over them and everything looks great, then maybe for you, the idea should be to find what is the common theme in all of these things that are going great, and how can I keep doing more of that? For most people, it's going to be sort of a mix. You're going to have some negative things that you want to address, and you may have some high points. See if you can determine what made those high points so great, and how can I take those underlying principles and apply them to other things. Okay, so we've looked at the classroom, we've walked around the classroom, we've looked through the plan book. There is a bird singing in my backyard, and that's just going to be on this recording. Okay, looked at the plan book, looked at the classroom. Now what I would like you to do is look at your student roster, whether that's on paper or on your computer, but I want you to be looking down the list of your student names. And do this slowly. What do you feel when you see each name? Which names make you feel relaxed, satisfied, proud, and which ones make your chest tighten with regret? Which ones make your stomach tense with anxiety? Which ones give you a negative feeling in some way? And are there some on that list where you think, wow, this is a kid I haven't paid any attention to this whole year? Every student, there should be some sort of a feeling. Look for patterns here too. If several students give you the same kind of bad feeling, see if you can find a common thread between them. Maybe there's a hole in your classroom management style. Maybe if there are a lot of students that you haven't given much attention to, maybe what we need is to find a system to make sure that you're distributing your attention a little more evenly. Maybe when you feel a negative feeling about certain students, there's a pattern in the demographics of those students. Maybe you need to learn more about working effectively with minority students. Maybe you lack confidence when working with autistic or special needs students. Once you've identified some themes in the relationships that you have with your students, choose 2 to 3 areas where you need to grow. And we'll talk about some things that you can do for your action plan. The next area, after we look at the classroom, the plan book, and the student roster, is to walk through your school, mentally or physically. Travel from classroom to classroom, picturing each teacher in your building. What are your feelings as you approach each one? Which coworkers give you a generally positive feeling? Which ones are neutral? And which ones make you feel nervous, angry, or annoyed? Your relationships with your colleagues have a huge impact on how you feel about coming to work every day. I wrote a piece called Find Your Marigold about surrounding yourself with the people who lift you up and who make you feel positive about what you're doing and who enjoy the kids and like the parents and get along with the administration. And these are people who really nurture our growth in the same way that marigold plants actually, it's kind of a long story, but marigolds are planted next to other plants and they sort of protect them as they grow. So my advice is that people find marigolds to spend their time with. And then the opposite of that is a walnut tree. Walnut trees tend to sort of poison all the plants that are around them, except for some that are especially hardy. So some teachers are marigolds and some teachers are walnut trees. And what you want to do is spend as much time as you can with the marigolds because they are going to nurture you and make you grow. So as you walk through the building, sort of identify where you're feeling really good and where you're feeling really not so good. With certain people, those are not relationships that you're ever really going to be able to improve or fix. And maybe those are people that you just kind of stay away from. For other people on this journey that you take through the school, maybe you're feeling negative about them because something about your relationship with them has been damaged in some way. Maybe something just went wrong in this past year, or maybe it's been going wrong for several years. But this feeling that you have about this person, it may be something that can be repaired, but you or this person have not taken the steps to repair it. That feeling of anxiety and sadness maybe, or anger, you carry that around with you every day. And if this is a person who you pass in the hall or you see in faculty meetings, or you may even have to work with them in a PLC or a department, those negative feelings are definitely going to have an impact on how you feel going to work every day, and they're going to have an impact on your job satisfaction. So it may be time now to take some steps to repair that relationship, to have a talk with this person and see what you can do about getting past whatever has happened between the two of you and find a way to move forward. If that's not possible, it may help just to identify it for yourself, just to say to yourself, wow, I never even thought about how bad I feel every time I pass her classroom. That's probably because of that thing that happened to us a few years ago. Maybe we can work on it, maybe we can't. Maybe those are just bygones. We can never get it back again. But at least now I realize, like, every time I pass this room, I feel negative. I need to be able to compartmentalize that at least and not let it impact the way I feel about the rest of the workday. It's also possible that you don't have any kind of damaged relationship with somebody, but maybe there's just a teacher that you kind of feel intimidated by, or that you just need to get to know better. So that could be part of your goals for the future, to get to know this person a little bit better, find a way to connect with them. So after going through the whole faculty and staff, choose a few people with whom you need to change your relationship, whether it's by repairing it, limiting it, or nurturing it. Okay, the last of the 5 areas we are going to look at are professional buzzwords. These are going to be terms that we hear in education, and these can also spark positive or negative experiences for us. As you listen to each one, do you have a positive feeling, a negative feeling, or mixed? And also just think about what other words you have a strong feeling about. So here are some of the words. Technology, differentiation, data, research-based strategies, Common Core, higher level thinking, flipped learning, standards-based, student choice, PLC. If any of those words give you negative or hard to name emotions, chances are you're feeling insecure about these topics. The struggle may be caused by policies you have nothing to do with, or they may indicate an area where you need to grow. Or they may indicate that there's a problem in your school with dealing with this particular thing. Maybe administration is putting a lot of pressure on you to do more of this thing and you don't feel that you have the tools. Maybe you feel that your peers are way ahead of you in this area. Or maybe this is just one of those hammers that just keeps getting pounded over and over again and you're just sick of it. So just think about 1 to 3 different terms that are going to be sort of focus areas for you, whether it's to fix the way you feel about it or get some extra training in it, or even talk to another teacher or an administrator about a problem with the way the school is handling it. But this may be a trigger for you in terms of how you're feeling about teaching in general, and maybe in terms of the quality of your practice. After you've worked through each area, take what you learned and let's turn this into a plan of action. For each of these 5 areas, identify 1 or 2 priorities for change. These may be positives into which you want to put more energy, negatives you want to correct, or ambiguities that just need more investigation. So what I've got, this is the printable that you can get, is a chart, and it's the first column is the 5 different areas. Down the left side, we have classroom, planning, students, coworkers, and professional practice. And then the second column is priorities. This is what you want to do to make a change in these areas, and then create an action plan for yourself, a specific, measurable action plan. So I'm going to give you 2 examples of how this works. Let's suppose in the area of your classroom, you got a really bad feeling right in the area where students turn work in, and you finally figured out that it's because of your makeup work system, that whenever students need to get makeup work turned in, or they're going to be like an in-school suspension or something like that, that the whole system for basically dealing with work for students who are not in class when they're supposed to be is just causing you way too much stress and energy. So In the classroom area, your priority for change would be to figure out what to do about makeup work and find a new system. Your actual action plan would be to research makeup work organization on Pinterest by a certain date, that you are going to set aside an hour to find a system on Pinterest, and then if that doesn't work, to talk to your colleagues about what they do. And until you find a system, you're going to just keep going until you find something that works. Maybe in the area of coworkers, you have a coworker named Morgan, and the two of you have just never really been that comfortable around each other. So maybe your priority in that area is to repair a relationship with Morgan, and the actual action plan is to ask her to lunch by July 1st. So you actually have a date set, and this is, your plan for making something happen in your relationship with this other teacher. So if you go to the blog post associated with this, and you can find that by going to cultofpedagogy.com/pod and click on episode 46, and you'll go to the page where you can actually see somebody who's actually filled this out and sort of just see how an example would work out. The final step that I would recommend is that you share this with a friend. The positive effects of doing this kind of reflection will be maximized if you and a few other teachers do the exercise and then share your results. We work too often in isolation, but we all have the same struggles. So opening up to other teachers is one of the best ways to grow as a teacher and love what you do. So even if you just have one other teacher in the building who you're close to, go to them and say, hey, let's do this reflection together. Let's sit down. Let's go to dinner. Let's order lunch in our classrooms this summer, and then let's just spend an hour thinking through this together, and we'll write up an action plan for ourselves. And then you can kind of have an accountability partner to check in with later on and see how it works. So I hope this has been helpful. I do think that teachers a lot of times get the opportunity to sort of reflect on how an individual lesson went, or maybe just on classroom management in general. Maybe you have to reflect after you're observed by an administrator. But I don't know how often you just sort of do this real kind of woo-woo, touchy-feely, kind of thinking about your physical reactions to things. But I feel like teaching is such an emotionally taxing job. So sometimes our days are so fast, we just run through them, and we're just sort of ingesting all of this stress, and we never necessarily take a close look at where it's all coming from. We can just say, oh, teaching is stressful. But I think if you start to parse out and pick apart the pieces of your teaching and figure out which things are contributing to the stress, you can get much better at improving those areas and making your day just go better. To download a printable worksheet of the gut level reflection, go to cultofpedagogy.com/pod and click on episode 46. Thanks for listening, and have a great day. This podcast is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. To learn more, visit edupodcastnetwork.com.